And to get started, we can buy some simpler, classic knives, but essentially what would be needed are these so-called Thai knives. Here you can see we have one version with a slightly curved blade. This part is used so that, if we don't have enough experience, we can trace shapes on the fruit, and then cut. We also have this, the so-called classic Thai knife, C. Their characteristic is that they have very thin blades, pointed and flexible, so they can pass through food, fruit, and vegetables more easily. And this is another variation on the theme, a little thinner, if it's easier for someone to work with a smaller, thinner knife. These are the variants you should have if you want to devote yourself to this work. And after this short introduction about the skill of carving fruit and vegetables, now I'll show you a few variations of how you can carve fruit and vegetables. The watermelon is used most, it is the most common in this skill. Why? Because of its color contrast. It has a green shade, a white shade, and red. And that's why it is most practiced in this carving skill. But to keep it short, let's get to work. Now I'll carve this small watermelon. And now a thin knife, an extremely sharp blade, short, and we begin. So we make a straight cut, we make a circle. And now, depending on which mosaic we imagined, whether a floral arrangement or some other mosaic variation, we begin by chopping. Be careful not to go too deep. So cut at an angle, not straight down but slanted. And now we make a line with the same pattern, so we surround it and make these, so to speak, petals around the whole circle. And in this variation we always go at an angle. Now that we've got our initial work, now we'll make a straight cut across all of these petals. But now we don't go at an angle, we go straight. Try as much as possible to make the thickness of all these petals roughly equal. It can't always be exactly the same, but do your best to make them as similar as possible. I've made a complete circle. Now we can continue with the same petals again. We can use another shape, a different type of mosaic, or another kind of petal, whatever we want. And now just in the center, that is, between each of these patterns we place the motif. I'll use the same petal, the same motif again. Now we cut at an angle. These lines were straight before, now diagonally. We remove it, but we must be careful not to break it accidentally. If necessary, we cut again. We continue around the circle and again make a cut around each of these petals. Now we go straight again, meaning first diagonal, then straight around. So literally now we want to surround each of these leaves, so that we can continue drawing our mosaic. We continue the circle, and now we can use the same leaf or any other one we want. But I'll go here with this single uniform one so the flower looks even, so that it will be easier for you later to do the same. So we follow the same leaf and now go diagonally again. Separate it, like this. And now we'll completely circle it and make the same leaf again. And now we circle around straight again. When we've made the shape we wanted. And now, again, we can leave it like this. We can further emphasize this by, between each of these, making small cuts like this. So, like this, as light, irregular circles. And just further highlight our work. So go at an angle, don't go deep. But often, if somewhere isn't cut properly, just pull it a little again. And we say, if somewhere isn't cut properly. We undercut it again, cut it, and remove it. If we want, we can now add some leaves here afterward. Or some strips, whatever we want. But here, you have this piece. Now we'll make a rose variation. For that we need a slightly different approach. So we make a larger circle like this. I've already mentioned it, so I'm not drawing it now. I already have enough experience. If you don't have enough experience and you're still a beginner, always sketch it out for yourself. Make a template on paper, practice, and only then proceed. But since I have a bit more experience, I'll go straight in right now like this. Let's literally make a slightly larger circle like this. We've made the circle. Now, if we pull away like this. Sometimes the peel is a bit harder, sometimes softer. So it depends on whether it'll be a bit easier, or a bit harder to work with. Here it is. Now we'll peel off this circle, so to speak. Just be careful, these are very sharp knives. And a single second can be the difference between getting hurt. I made this on purpose now, this will be a bigger flower. So you can more easily see how it's done. Usually we make several smaller roses. So one straight, one slanted, and now we go straight again. Roughly, from the middle, so to speak, these petals, a new one begins. When you make this flower, you don't have to be very precise. Because in nature nothing is exactly symmetrical. Everything is asymmetrical. So you don't have to fuss to make everything identical. That's why it's much easier to make this flower than, for example, a mosaic. When we prepare a mosaic, then everything should be symmetrical and identical. And when we make floral textures like this, we can relax. And now we go, circle, and head toward the center. We continue this part and now slowly move toward the center. And we circle, circle until we reach the actual bud, so to speak. If necessary, we need to cut a little, thicken it. We literally need to go around each petal twice with the knife. We gently approach the center and make the bud. We got this central part and now we'll go around with more petals. Once we've made the circle, now we make a petal. And now again the shape of the petal. This is one of the easier jobs for me because, as I've already emphasized, it doesn't have to be precise for me. So it's much easier for me to work on than those mosaics that must be extremely precise. Now, we can make the flower much bigger or smaller. We can make more smaller flowers, it all depends on what we have in mind. What kind of design, but I'll do one more circle of petals like this. And then I'll finish this watermelon. And here it is, so we have one big flower, we could have made several smaller ones. So I made this one bigger, just so you can see how it's done. Now I'll gently surround it completely like this. So that, let's say, the flower stands out. To highlight that flower we made, here it is. And to make this a little different now, so it makes more sense. Now we can either use a knife and make some zigzag patterns. Once we've surrounded it like this, we can use one of these carving gouges to create some ribs, some textures. But they're usually very dull, so I go with the option to just use the knife, lightly zigzagging like this. I make the pattern simply to accentuate these petals, then just the most logical zigzag patterns around the whole watermelon, and that way we'll further highlight these petals, this flower. I started everything with a regular knife, and we still have in two places what I showed, the zigzag variant. So we always try to separate, to emphasize the main work, so to speak. Here we have a finished watermelon variant. And now, if we want, we can carve a variation. Like a small leaf or a little branch. Just to show you how that can be done. You just have to be careful when making these little branches or leaves. Don't cut too deep, so the watermelon won't crack. When they're very ripe, it can happen that. See, we've finished the whole watermelon. If I cut a bit deeper now, it just splits and cracks. That's why you need to be a bit careful. Here, roughly like a little branch coming out here, you see.